presentation today, I will talk mostly about ChatGPT and a few others, but simply because this is the first company launching generative AI. It's almost exactly 1 year ago, and already in 5 days, they hit 1 million users. That took Facebook nearly a year to get to 1 million users. But it didn't stop there, because already after 2 months, they had more than 100 million users. So it really is the biggest out there. But just to say, there are so many more, so I cannot cover all of them. Now, typically, there is one huge reason why people or companies are reluctant to start using generative AI, and that is the data. The risk of having their data in the company being put into the big pile of information that the machine is trained on. And maybe some of you have heard about the case with Samsung, where some of the employees had uploaded the source code of the company into ChatGPT. And obviously, that is the worst nightmare scenario for any company. Luckily, it's not much more than a few weeks ago that ChatGPT launched ChatGPT Enterprise, which means that all the data that you type in stays within your company. So there is a solution, and then there's of course also the solution to have your own company GPT. So with that very short introduction, let me get into some real case examples from companies around the world and how they use generative AI. And the first example is from Denmark, where I come from. This is a company that makes rooftop windows, and they use it for marketing materials. And this is a good example of the impact you can get of using generative AI, because here they had a task of creating a lot of marketing materials, actually so much that they estimated this would take them 100 hours to complete. And luckily, there was an employee saying, maybe we should try ChatGPT first. And that's exactly what they did. And one of the key points about using generative AI is that you cannot just take it as it is. You will always need to do some sort of editing at the end. They also needed to do that. But this task that they had estimated would take them 100 hours. They ended up spending 2 hours on editing the output from ChatGPT. So a huge savings in time. The next example is about analyzing data, and this comes from Unilever, and they have used ChatGPT to analyze huge amounts of data to create a new scent for a new customer group. And obviously, ChatGPT cannot smell, but each smell has a certain code for ingredients, and you can actually use it to analyze these huge amounts of data points. Next example is from a company called WPP, based in the UK. This company was back in 2019 the world's biggest communications and PR company. And this is their HR department that used ChatGPT to create a framework for competence development. So essentially mapping every single job description to help employees to how they could maneuver or grow within the company. And again, as the HR responsible said at the end, we ended up spending more time using this framework than to actually create it, which would usually take a lot of time. Then ChatGPT can also create code, and the example you see here on this screen is from GitHub. This is the world's largest developer platform, where software developers and programmers type in the code. And today 48% of all code is made by AI and not by a human being. So these were a lot of examples of text, but of course there are other tools out there than ChatGPT, and Midjourney is one of them. So if you combine with other types of generative AI, and again, there are many, many more but I'm just mentioning one of them, and Midjourney can create pictures. And that means, for instance, if you need to do product development, or so, new product design, you can in seconds get many different types of examples and proposals for, and in this case, it's a yogurt that has been created, product designs. But again, you can get this in seconds, where usually as a company, you would go to a marketing agency, and that can easily take a couple of weeks to get this. And if you then start to combine everything, the text, the code, the pictures, we have here an example, which is Coca-Cola. And they have combined everything into, they call it Y3000, the Coca-Cola of the future. So the recipe for this Coca-Cola, the branding, everything has been generated by AI. And then I will end with these all these many examples with maybe the most extreme one. This one is from a company in Portugal, where the CEO basically put his hands into ChatGPT. He said, I have $1,000, help me build a business. And he used ChatGPT every day for about an hour, and he basically did everything it told him to do. So he asked, what type of company should I build? And it suggested, I know the screen may seem a bit, what is this I see on the screen? But what you see is t-shirts with very colorful print. And that was what ChatGPT suggested, that he should create these AI generated prints on clothes and sell that. And that's what he did. And already after 1 week, his company was profitable. And it didn't stop about, what he should do. It came up with his entire marketing, branding, communication, also what type of companies could help him produce these t-shirts and other clothes. It helped him in terms of what investors could invest in his company, and essentially every single thing you can imagine to grow his company, it helped him do. These were a lot of examples of how different companies use generative AI for their business. And the conclusion is that generative AI will impact more or less all companies, or at least all companies that are either digital or knowledge based on. And you see here the curve. And so unless you are in the business of restaurants or building a house, you can be less concerned. But if you are in any type of company where human knowledge or digital services is the center point, you will see an impact. And impact can go in two ways. It can go in the direction that you will be disrupted, like the example I gave with the rooftop company, where you can save 98 hours on a marketing task. If I was sitting in a marketing company today, I would be very worried. So you can't be disrupted, but impact can also be in a positive sense, in the sense that you in your company can really have so many benefits and use ChatGPT to grow and develop your company. And that is the beauty of these generative AIs, because they can be used across the company, basically in every single department. And I have listed here 3 different use cases for each department. there are many, many more. It's just to give a sense of how it can be used across the company. And it's everything from strategies to emails, marketing materials, writing code, but also to help executives take better decisions, because you can get analysis, trend reports, competitor analysis to give you more scenarios and risk analysis to make better decisions. And when we are talking about impact, there have been many predictions in terms of how big of an impact are we talking about. And I will not mention all the different ones, but only one, and that is coming from McKinsey, and they estimate that 50% of all work activities could be made by AI. Now, these are predictions, and I always prefer to see some real numbers in terms of, so what is the impact? And I have brought with me today, and I will do it super short, but 3 different studies that show impact. And the first one was looking at creativity. And in this case here, they looked at how many ideas can a person versus ChatGPT come up with. And for every time a human being came up with 20 new ideas, ChatGPT came up with 800, so 40 times as many. Now, getting a lot of ideas is maybe not necessarily better, right? So they also thought, okay, let's look at all these ideas that we have here and see which ones are the best ones. So they had this panel of people looking through all the ideas, picking the top 40, and then when they looked at the top 40, 35 of them came from ChatGPT and only 5 from a human being. So ChatGPT is more creative. The second study is a study done by the MIT, and this was looking at productivity. And they had 444 people divided into 2 groups, one group using ChatGPT and the other group not using ChatGPT. And then they were giving tasks that lasted 30 minutes, different tasks that were all within their level of experience. And what they found was that ChatGPT, people using ChatGPT were 37% faster. And yeah, not only that, they also found that the quality was higher. So faster, as you know, is not necessarily better, right? But they were actually 20% better quality as well. And then the last study, the third study, is by Boston Consulting Group in collaboration with Harvard. And this is where they had 758 consultants. So quite a lot of consultants involved in this study. And they were given 18 different tasks. And again, it was not some random tasks. These tasks were all tasks that these consultants would be given in general for their daily work. It was a mix of creative and analytical tasks. And then they looked at, again, divided into 2 groups. Half of the consultants were allowed to use ChatGPT, and the other half was not allowed to use ChatGPT. And what they found was that when they looked at the consultants using ChatGPT, they could complete 12% more tasks. They could do it 25% faster and with 40% higher quality. Now, again, this was actually not the most interesting part of this study. You could also say, isn't it kind of what we just saw in the other ones? But what they then did after finding these results, is that they said, okay, let's look at the consultants here, because some consultants were very experienced, but there were also some less experienced junior consultants. And when they looked into the two groups, they found that the junior consultants, or the less experienced consultants, had a massive 43% increase in performance. So a very high increase in performance here. And then when they compared with the very experienced consultants, they still had an increase, only 17%. Oh, I'm not even sure I should say only, but a 17% increase in performance. And when you look at the purple bars here, you see they almost end up at exactly the same level. So the experienced ones, it also makes sense that maybe they don't use ChatGPT to the same extent as the less experienced ones, but essentially you see that all employees become top performers. So to conclude, ChatGPT will not replace you. Somebody using ChatGPT will. And maybe you have heard this phrase before. It is kind of a saying. But I mean, it's one thing that all these different surveys or research shows this, but we also see the first signs around in companies. And the example I have here is also maybe a bit more extreme than other companies, but this is what you see here is a guy called Martin Thorborg from Denmark, the managing director of a company making an accounting system. And he essentially told his employees in his company that you have 3 months. You have 3 months to get used to using ChatGPT and learn how to use it. And if you find out after 3 months that this is not something you find valuable or useful for your job, well, maybe this is not the right company for you. I know it may be a bit extreme, but I think it's also maybe a first sign of how some of these first mover CEOs start to think about using generative AI in their company. So this leads me to the last part of my presentation. This is about how you can get started. And in general, I see 3 types of companies. I see the ones that I call it the ostrich, the elephant, and the cheetah. So the ostrich, as you know, is known for hiding its head in the sand. So these are the types of companies that forbid to use ChatGPT and basically say, let's wait and see what happens. And honestly, I see the majority of companies in this category. Then there are the elephant types of companies, and they are the ones that go all in on one specific use case and say, this is where we will make our bet. And that is what they go all in doing. And then you have the cheetah. The cheetah is the fastest animal on land, at least in the world. And these are to symbolize the types of companies that make a lot of experiments and try it out, maybe not big scale like the elephant, but try many different use cases to see what works for them. So here are my top 3 tips to get started. Tip number 1, get started. Get off the ground, run an innovation sprint to identify different use cases. I have listed some examples. There are, of course, many, many more, but just to give a flavor of different types of use cases for using generative AI. And you see here, it's everything from new product ideas to analyzing data to create new strategies, optimizing supply chain. So, it can be across the company. And of course, here I just listed like a high level headline. Of course, these use cases would be fleshed out a bit more. But then you map them into in a quadrant based on the impact and the effort to then decide where do we start. That was step number 1. Step number 2 is to educate and train employees. Because even though we can all go into ChatGPT and make a prompt and say, how do I do this or that? There is actually an art of prompting, meaning the way you make your task to ChatGPT really matters, what you write. Better prompts, better results. And there are a lot of tips and tricks in order to make good prompts. And then step number 3 is to accelerate, meaning run these experiments, get a lot of learnings, share those learnings across the company, and then you can start setting goals. Typically in companies, we like to set the goals first. And of course, you can have some overall goals, but I actually recommend in this case that you start by experimenting. And then when you have some first indications in terms of results, then you set goals and define success metrics. These are the 3 high-level steps. And then let's not forget to get the foundation in place. Either make your own company GPT. I see a lot of companies going in that direction to keep it safe, or get the enterprise solution. Establish a governance framework, and this is where what this means is, have some rules in terms of what can employees actually put in terms of data, and never put in personal data, and then anchor AI and your strategy within the overall company strategy. And with that, I will complete my presentation. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think I was more or less spot on in terms of the time. Thank you so much. And I guess there might be some questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, for your wonderful presentation. Just one question I had for companies who want to go in and out, the cheetah type of companies, the generative AI, and companies want to start using generative AI for whatever they are doing. But if you go back and see, they don't have a proper data strategy in place till now. They are not having a reporting structure or very basic data strategy that is there. So what is your advice, and when you talk to such companies, or what is your advice for these companies who don't have in their company strategy a data strategy or a AI strategy in place, and they want to adopt the generative AI because of the FOMO effect, right? Fear of missing out. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's, what comes first, the chicken and the egg, right? Because you can also spend a year creating a data strategy and creating what should we do and find the way forward. So I think the most important part is to ensure, first of all, that people don't go rogue on the OpenAI, where all data that is put in can flood into the big pile of data, right? So to have some of the governance is important to have in place first. But then I do think that you have to be careful. You don't need to have too many strategies in place before you can get started. As I said, then it can take a lot of time. But at least have the boundaries in place in terms of what are you allowed as an employee to do, and ideally have either an enterprise solution or a secure company GPT, because then there's not a big of a risk there. And then you can then start experimenting in terms of creating some of the content. I mean, even basic things like writing emails, writing the annual report, creating some of those types of content, it can help you from day one doing that, right? So there are also different levels in terms of, is it the big data IT implications that we have, or what? So also finding the level. But it's a very good question. for sure. And in the ideal world, you would have all these strategies in place first, of course. Yeah, but you don't always.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there any other question from anyone who would like to ask, as ma'am is on the conclusion part? And is there anyone?
Maybe a quick question from my side.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
In SEO Philomex, a fellow speaker. So maybe a quick question, because we have lots of legislation initiatives, especially in Europe, around the use of generative AI, especially on public data. Is there anything been done in Denmark or considered in Denmark in this area? Thank
In
you.
Denmark specifically, you asked?
Yeah.
No, not yet. I think the politicians are trying to catch up, but we don't have any specific regulations at this point.
Mm-hmm. And there's also amazing initiatives about sharing healthcare records between EU countries. So I think it could be really good boost to what we can do with AI internationally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.